Hi guys, this is our first of the adaptive immunity lectures. In previous lectures, we talked about the innate immune system as well as inflammation. And inflammation is mostly mediated by the innate immune system because that's the first line of defense. So we already talked quite a bit about what the immune system does, and we talked a little bit about innate immunity versus adaptive immunity. And there are three main characteristics that distinguish adaptive immunity from innate immunity. So one is that there's a more systemic effect. So generally speaking, innate immunity and the first line of defense, which is inflammation, is localized, whereas an adaptive immunity has a more systemic effect that's throughout the body. There's also specificity, which means that there's immunity that's directed against a particular pathogen so that it's targeted to that pathogen and it's able to clear it a little bit better. Whereas the innate immune system is nonspecific and will act to clear any sort of foreign invader. There's also memory, which is what we talked about a little bit on our last class, but immune memory is when you're re-exposed to the same pathogen so that the body is able to react more quickly in clearing that pathogen, oftentimes without you even noticing that there's any sort of sickness going on. So there are two types of immunity, and this goes for both adaptive and innate immunity, but here we'll just focus on the adaptive immunity, the two different types. So there's cellular and humoral immune defenses within adaptive immunity. So cellular, as you would expect, is mediated by cells. And this can be from lymphocytes, which are T and B cells, directly attacking and destroying foreign cells or diseased host cells, so that it's able to rid the body of pathogens inside of the cells where they might be inaccessible to antibodies, since antibodies aren't able to gain entry into the cell and they're only on the outside of cells. So this cellular mediated immunity will kill cells that are infected or diseased, usually if they have a virus within them that's replicating. Humoral or antibody mediated immunity comes from the idea of, if you think about old medicine when they talked about the humors, these were the different fluids. So it's basically fluid mediated, but it's called antibody mediated or humoral. So this is mediated by antibodies that don't directly destroy a pathogen, but tag it for destruction by other cells. So different antibodies are dissolved in body fluids, which are called the humors. If you remember from our blood lecture, one of the main proteins within plasma are the immunoglobulins, which are antibodies. So these can only work if the extracellular stages of infections are by microorganisms. So if you remember, microorganisms can impact human health or any animal's health by either being intracellular, which would be usually viruses or some intracellular bacteria, or they can be extracellular, which means that they're outside of the host cell, but they're still causing some sorts of diseases. So humoral mediated immunity will only work on the extracellular infections where they can see the antigens and the antibodies can actually bind to those antigens there. So further dividing the adaptive immune system up are the ideas of active immunity and passive immunity. So active immunity can either be natural or artificial. So natural active immunity is the production of your own antibodies or T cells as a result of an infection or unnatural exposure to an antigen. So this would be if you're walking around, you get infected with something and your body is creating its own antibodies. Whereas artificial active immunity is the production of your own antibodies or T cells as a result of vaccination against disease. So this is an artificial means of getting exposure to an antigen. So vaccines are made up of dead or attenuated, which means weakened, pathogens that will then stimulate the immune response without actually causing the disease. So this allows the body to create antibodies to that antigen so that if you are exposed to that again, you are able to more quickly clear that infection. Sometimes you do need booster shots, which are periodic immunizations that stimulate immune memory um, to maintain a high level of protection against the antigens. So adaptive immunity can also be passive. And of course, there's natural and artificial means of this passive immunity. So natural passive immunity is temporary immunity that results from antibodies that are produced by another person. So this would be like when a fetus acquires antibodies from the mother through the placenta or the milk. And this actually forms the basis of the fetal immune system, since their immune systems aren't totally developed during that infancy stage. So artificial passive immunity is the temporary immunity that results from the injection of immune serum or antibodies from another person or animal. So this would be an intervention by medical experts. So this could be the treatment for a snake bite, botulism, rabies, tetanus, and other diseases. So you're getting those antibodies from someone else. You're not making them your own during passive immunity.